Well, poor old girl looks like she's on some kind of an odd, strange hippie caravan or something here. We're going backwards a little bit. We've got the tranny out again. So we'll pull the seats out and put them on the roof. Why would the tranny be back out? Because I just rebuilt it in December. And that was the first time I'd ever rebuilt a tranny. Call it a learning exercise. I learned lots. And I also learned that there's little tricks along the way that you can pick up from other people. And when you're unsupervised and you're learning on your own with the reference to the internet and videos like maybe this one, you don't know what to ask. You can't ask what you don't know. So there's a couple things. Really wanted to get the car running and drivable and test driving. And I accomplished that, and I did that. And I fixed the tranny noise. I did still hear, after the tranny was rebuilt, and I'm shifting gears, this is your Synchromesh right here, the clutch gear. I could still hear a little grinding noise. It just didn't feel right. And all the gears worked, but there's still a little grinding noise only when I shifted. So the other thing, I heard a little bit of noise when I'd push the clutch in, but it was still in gear. I'd hear a little bit of a rattle. The gears, I took it apart and everything looks good. I wanted to just double check my work, I guess. But there was one thing that was annoying me, that after you rebuild the tranny and you put it back together, down inside of here, as you know, is the countershaft or cluster gear. This is the countershaft right here. It comes through the tranny housing. It's held in place by this bolt here. This little plate with a bolt on it. That just prevents it from moving. And the little bit of oil drip would come out of here. Real slow. No, you might get one drip overnight on the ground in your shop. You know, it's kind of annoying. You do all that work and it's dripping. So I'm going to take this plate out. I'm going to push the countershaft out a little bit more, and I'm going to just load up this countershaft area with pipe dope here, some kind of sealant, anaerobic sealant maybe. Push it back in and let it set and set up. That'll seal that. So that'll take care of the leak. And the other thing, I didn't really like the look. I like to coat my gaskets with a gasket spray. This goes on here. And for whatever reason, I didn't. And these gaskets are quite thin and flimsy. They seem to be working, I guess, but I think I got a new gas set anyways because I knew I was going to fix this leak. I was probably going to take it apart and look at the gears again. And this time I'm going to spray them with Permatex. I'm going to use the copper. It's for high temperature, but it's good on anything. And coat both sides of my gaskets when I put it back together. I feel better about it. Puts a nice little kind of soft bit of a film over the gasket, and it just helps it seal a little bit better, I think. That's my opinion. So I'm going to do that this time. Now let's look at why. I did more research on why there's a little bit of a chirping, grinding, a little bit of slight, mild grinding noise when I shift in gear. Only second and third. The Synchromesh here is only used in second and third gear. And I took it apart. I looked at the gears. Everything looked good. All these teeth are sharp here. The teeth on the neighboring gears are nice and crisp and sharp. And on the other side of this contacts into the pinion gear, which is right there. They all looked good. I couldn't quite understand where the noise was coming from or why. So I did a little bit more reading and researching, and there's a ramp here. There's a tapered cone here, or a ramp you might want to call it. And as the gear, this cluster gear, gets pushed towards second gear, this is second gear down here below it, you shift, you push it like that. When you push the collar like that, it goes into the ramp and starts to speed up and starts to match the speed of the neighboring gear. It matches the speed because it just walks up this ramp, and this is tied to second here. So it's the clutch gear here speeds up. And if you look inside, there's these little square brass looking squares in there. You see those? and they have funny spacing. They're not all the same space, and they're cut that way. My understanding is they're cut in like that to help disperse oil out of the way, and it can grip onto that cone as it's going in towards the cone there. In second gear, it's moving the oil out of the way and getting a good grip. As you push it, it bites on it and speeds up. But those little brass areas are prone to wear. And I took a little scraper, a little small screwdriver, and I could feel a ridge on the back end down inside of there, where these are just getting thinner over time. And they don't speed up and slow down as well as they should, probably, is my guess. And this affects the speed of the gear. So when this clutch gear doesn't match the speed of second gear, and you force it on when you're shifting, it grinds. So I figured I'm going to replace this. I looked up the original part number. I have a parts book, and I can get this. It was $80 US. Some guy had it listed for $100 US. Brand new original Chrysler parts, still in the original box from the 50s, I guess, or 60s or something. NOS, new old stock. He was asking $100 US or best offer. I offered him $80 and he took it. Awesome. So this whole new gear will have new brass surfaces in here. They'll all be factory spec again. You can see them on both sides. There's one other one in there. I don't know if I don't want to push that down too far and have it pop apart. Be careful, don't push this apart. It springs and screws inside of it. They'll go flying everywhere. It can be reassembled, but you don't want to push this apart if you don't have to. Anyways, getting the whole new gear, put it on there, and I think that's going to fix my my speed matching problem with the Synchromesh. I hope so. That's my theory, anyways. And the other thing I didn't do when I had this tranny apart is I didn't replace the pilot bushing. The pilot bushing sits in the end of the crankshaft, and the input shaft of the transmission slides into the crankshaft, and the pilot bushing sits right in this area here. And as the pilot bushing wears, you get a little bit of movement, a little bit of misalignment. It's like an oil light, I think it's called. It's a substance that's it's some kind of a mix of metal with carbon or some type of dry lubricant that mix into an oil product, and it's self-lubricated basically for life. And I didn't have a pilot bearing puller, so I started doing research online about how to pull out a pilot bearing out of the end of the crankshaft, right? And I hate to, I'll buy a tool if I think I'm going to use it more than once. I might use it twice, 3 times in my lifetime. I'm okay buying it. But I figured, man, what are the chances of me changing a pilot bushing again in my life? So, a tool was only cheap Harbor Freight type tool, $25 or something like that, US. So I thought, well, I'll give it a shot doing what some of the other guys do online. They tell you to go in the pilot hole in the end of the crankshaft and stuff it full of grease and find a bolt that's the exact right size and hammer the bolt in there, and the grease will act like hydraulic forces and push the bushing out, the pilot bushing. Well, just turns out I had a spare crankshaft sitting here. This is out of a 218, 1949, I think it is, 218 engine. And I found the right size bolt. I cut the threads off the end of it. And then we cut an O-ring. A buddy of mine has a lathe, machining lathe. We cut a groove in here and found an O-ring that was a nice tight fit. Again, to hopefully just hold that grease in there. Fill that hole full of grease. Put this in there. And then hammer on it. Hopefully the grease will drive the bushing out. Well, I soaked that bushing there in penetrating oil overnight. And I tried to hammer that out of there, and I did it multiple times with grease and a big hammer. I put the crankshaft up against the wall so it wasn't moving when I hit it. That bushing would not come out of there. It just wouldn't come out. So I don't know if there's a different design for different engines, and it works for some engines, but it didn't work for me on this Mopar engine. So I thought, well, I got to try something else. This isn't going to work. And it's so nice to have a spare crankshaft to experiment on, because if I screw things up, I'd be really choked if something happened. I mean, what's going to happen? The bushing's going to come out of there. I get that. But I'd like to master the technique, so I had the opportunity. So what I did was I took a set of my micro files, and I started filing the bottom of this bushing, and I cut a line through it all the way down. This isn't the bushing. This is a different one. I cut all the way down till I got through the bushing, and then I put the grease in there. And then I hammered this in, and it popped out no problem. Pulled a bushing with it. Worked, but it can be difficult to get into your crankshaft on your engine when the flywheel housing and everything is still in place. So I didn't really feel like getting in there. So I broke down and I bought this small pilot bearing puller. And literally, it was like I said, 25 bucks. And I had the pilot bushing out in about 2-3 minutes. Super easy. So there you go. That's my experience. You're gonna pull a pilot bushing, just go get the tool. It makes it so easy. So I thought that might help me maybe with any alignment issues, a new bushing. The other thing that could affect alignment issues, I wanted to replace the motor mounts, right? These are original. There's 2 of them at the back. I'll show you. There's a cross member at the back of the engine, right here. And there's motor mount here, 2. Rubber on top, rubber on the bottom, with metal plates on the top and bottom. This is the original one. It sits in there like just like that. And this one looks pretty good. The other one looked worse. And this washer here has a spacer that goes through it and through this hole, and it bolts up from the bottom. See the bolt head there? The new ones I bought were thicker. They're about this much thicker here. And they also, this whole area here in this area is metal. And the rubber vibration dampener here, the motor mount, it's somehow vulcanized to this steel plate here in the middle. And when I had it in there before, I used them, I wasn't thinking about this. I found a way to make them get in there and they fit, but they didn't fit down the hole here. There's like a hole in the center of the A-frame that this part sits in. It didn't want to sit in there, and it was metal, so it was set cockeyed here, not straight. And they were taller. So what that does, yeah, sure, that the flywheel housing here is bolted to the engine. You're not going to really change the angle there. But at the end of your transmission now, you take this increase in distance here and multiply it across the length of the transmission. The output shaft of the transmission might be, I don't know, could be an inch higher than it's supposed to be. And that puts a little bit more stress on the drive shaft at the back. And the fact that they weren't sitting flush and even, things could have been misaligned slightly. So I took these motor mounts. I should have maybe made a video before I reinstalled them here. My buddy put them on his lathe and we cut them to the same height as this. We used an X-Acto knife and put it in his lathe here and trimmed off. We made them the same height, a little tiny bit longer, maybe 2 millimeters longer, just to allow for the crush, maybe. And then I also had to trim the metal around this area on them to make them fit down in the holes, so they sit flush now. They sit flush on the cross member. They never did. So I'm hoping that's going to help with any alignment issues. I hear that you can't get decent motor mounts anywhere anymore for these old cars. That all the ones are like mine here. They're just not right. Someone's making bad motor mounts. It's not ideal. So I did clean them up. See what happens. There's my throw-up bearing. Clutch. You can see in there, and pilot bushing is in place. That tool fit in the hole. I went from the bottom. No problem. Fitting that pilot bushing in there. Worked well. So I'll put my clutch back in. I'm just waiting for my clutch gear to show up, my Synchromesh. And then I'll reassemble the tranny again and off we'll go. We'll go ride again. And you know what? This has been a riot. I really enjoy this. It's just a hobby. I really enjoy working on the car. So going back into the tranny and again after I did it, it's no big deal, but you watch my videos, you can learn what I missed. Biggest issue was sealing up the output shaft there, there's counter shaft. A misalignment of motor mounts. That's about it. Everything else seemed to work. I'm gonna actually, while the U-joints or the universal drive shaft is underneath the car there, I'm gonna rebuild the universal joint at this end here. It's just looking a little bit. It's not really. There's no slop in it, but I bought a kit anyways. I'm gonna rebuild it while it's out. So that's kind of where I'm at this week. I put 300 miles on the car since I got it back on the road and rebuilt the tranny and did all that work last winter. So it's running decent, and I'm getting a little picky in my old age, I guess. I wanted to clean up the leaks, maybe address the grinding in the tranny. Hopefully, I think I got it. So we'll see. I'll report back after I put it back together. So there you go. Learn from my mistakes. Have a good one.